This is the Modern Mastery Unleashed podcast.
Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. We are super excited because we have Courtney Brown in the house. Welcome, Tony. He is the director and co-founder of Total Body Health. We all share this passion for this wellness revolution because I think between all of us, we've had an extraordinary story that has brought us up to this point in time. And I know that Tony has the most extraordinary story. So for everyone that's listening today, if you have experienced any type of pain in your life, physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, you're going to want to stay tuned today because we have quite the episode for you.
Oh, don't we just? Yeah, so I've been in contact with Tony for, I guess it's a couple of years now, and we share on a very deep level what governs human performance, our conditioning, pharmaceuticals, let's say, all kinds of things which really can hinder optimal performance, and we want to do and have all we're capable of in this lifetime, obviously. So Tony's got an incredible story. So I guess we just kick it off really, Tony, is like, what really shaped your early life, would you say?
That's a really good question. And I think, as they say in The Sound of Music, I'll have to start at the very beginning.
Please do.
My parents are Jamaican, and they came over in the mid-50s as part of the Windrush generation. And I came along at the wrong time. My mother was training to be a nurse, living in Northampton in a bedsit. And my dad at the time was at Nottingham University. And then along comes me. Now, my mum, bless her, was trying to cope with doing 12-hour shifts and look after me. So what she used to do was, she had one of these old record players, and she'd stack all the 78s on them, and she'd play the records and go to work. And I apparently was fine while the records were playing, but when the music stopped, I just screamed. And of course, the neighbours would hear this, and my mother was told in no uncertain terms, you have to do something else or we'll take him into care. So I was fostered from a few months old with a number of people before eventually going to a Dutch family who I stayed with till I was 6. Now, they were really lovely people, and I had 2 older foster brothers and grew up on a flower nursery. So my first memories are of these sort of acres, so it seemed to me at the time, of tulips and daffodils and crocuses spreading far into the distance, which were about the same height as me at the time. And it was bliss. When I was 5, my foster father had been training in social work, and we went down to Bristol, where he took over as a master in an approved school, which is like a bookstore. At the age of 5, I first started school. And one day when I was walking down the road, people started throwing stones at me and screaming racial abuse, which I'd never heard before. And then that was the first time I realized that I was a different color to everybody around me. I went home, I got in the bath with a scrubbing brush and some scouring powder and started scrubbing to try and get the color off. Luckily, my foster mother came in and said, "What are you doing?" And I explained what had happened. She was a lovely, lovely woman. And she washed all the stuff off me, wrapped me up in a towel, gave me a huge hug, and said, "Those people are just stupid. You're as good as anybody. Ignore them. But understand this, that color won't come off. That's the way you are." Age of 6, my parents had sort of got themselves established and had got a house in the outskirts of Northampton, and I went to live with them. But to me, they were complete strangers, huge cultural difference, and massive expectations that my father had. Now, at the age of 6, he told me, "You're going to be a lawyer, boy." I didn't know what a lawyer was. I wanted to be a train driver, which kind of didn't match his expectations. It didn't work from the get-go with both. So I think that was one of the biggest things. It was a shock to go from a really blissful environment into something that I found culturally difficult. It was violent. It was a complete change to everything that I'd known, and I had to change very quickly to adapt. And I think to some extent I switched off, because that's the only way that you can cope with something. Sometimes you just blank out and get through each day. Now, one of the things that happened was that I started primary school, and again got a lot of abuse and bullying and so on there. But I was very good at football. I excelled at football and got into Northampton boys team. Now, I'd hoped that my dad would be happy and proud about that, whereas his response was, "Stop that nonsense, go and study your books." So again, it was a complete mishmash, didn't quite match up. As I got older, I sort of understood a little bit, because I was still too young, why he was like that. And I learned a bit about his background. He grew up in Jamaica, where he had to run 3 miles to school in bare feet. And from there, he got a scholarship to a technical college, and then to Toronto University, and eventually to Nottingham University over here, where he graduated in chemistry and agriculture. But it being the 50s, the best job he could get with that was a guard on British Rail. And it made him very angry, very bitter. He left that job after a while, and he met a guy from, I think it was Czechoslovakia, who had a vacuum cleaner company. And he gave my dad a job as a vacuum cleaner salesman, and he went door to door selling vacuums. And sometimes I'd go with him, and that was an experience. Most of the time, the doors were slammed in our faces and we got the usual abuse. But if he got inside a house, there was no way he was leaving without selling a vacuum cleaner. He had the most tenacious attitude to life. You could never tell him that something was not possible or that he couldn't do something. And despite some of his negative downside qualities, I will always appreciate what he showed me with regard to that.
Well, it goes a long way in life, doesn't it, Tony? I mean, with 8 years of door-to-door sales under my belt also, I can totally appreciate that. And I trained other people to do it who didn't want to do it either, that was quite a turn up for the books. But nevertheless, all of our lives changed, and it was a magical thing. But I mean, that's quite a start, isn't it? To initially feel that you don't belong, as our tribal beginnings always emulate in our lives, that we have a deep need to belong, don't we? And I feel like if you've got a culture shock like that, creates quite a strong defense mechanism, doesn't it? And that numbing sensation of just trying to blank it out, and the ego creating a structure for us to keep us safe enough to cope, isn't it? It's like a coping mechanism of a trauma, isn't it, really, to be fair? So that's quite something, Tony, isn't it? I mean, we can pass it off in conversation now, but at the time, that must be quite something to go through.
It was, and I found that hard. But when I was 8, he took me to Jamaica for the first time, and he took me to his mother's house, and that was a shock. We arrived there, and there were all these dogs running around. Of course, I had a dog at home, so I put my hand out to stroke it, and my dad just whacked me across the top of the head and said, "Don't touch the dogs. They're not like your dog at home. These dogs guard the property." Number one. My grandmother lived in it was basically just a round room with a mud floor. And I walked in, I said, "Dad, where's the kitchen?" He said, "See that pile of stones? That's what she cooks on." "Where's the bedroom?" I said, "Just sleeps on the floor over there." "Where's the bathroom?" "Come." Took me out the side of the place, and there's a river. There's a man sitting stark naked on a rock, washing himself. And he said, "Bathroom." Wow. That, again, was a real eye-opener, and thought he came from that to achieve what he did, which was amazing. Now, one day when he was out selling vacuum cleaners, driving around, and a bus hit his car and it rolled down a hill. And as a result of that, he got a stroke, very badly injured, and he couldn't work for a couple of years. My mother, who was a nurse, kept things going. He eventually got a payout from that, and with that, he acquired a club, a building that he turned into a club for Caribbean people of the area and surrounding areas to come to. And it was like a shebeen. It was had lots of reggae music blasting out, early reggae music, ska music, had jukeboxes, plenty of white rum, rice and peas and chicken were served in the kitchen. It was an amazing place, and people would come from all around, and then English people discovered it, and even they would come to it as well. And it was very successful. And then somehow, I don't know how, he heard from a lot of the Caribbean people that they were saving up to go home for a holiday and couldn't afford it. And he hit upon an idea of charter flights. And he negotiated with Air France, British Airways as it was then, and a number of other airlines, and chartered planes to send people back to the Caribbean for holidays at half the price of a normal fare. He made a load of money very quickly, very, very quickly, and a lot. And then it came time for me to take the 11 plus, and life changed again. I failed. Now, to him, that was the biggest disgrace that could ever happen. He went round to the headmaster of my primary school and demanded to have a chat with him. And the headmaster said to him, "Well, your son is bright, but not intelligent." And my dad came back and told me that, and that was something that stuck for a long time. And as Paul said, conditioning maps your behavior. It stops you from doing things, or it can push you in another direction. My dad was so outraged by this. He said, "Well, I'm not sending him to a secondary modern." And he said, "What else can happen?" And the headmaster said, "Well, you can send him to a private school, but it costs a lot of money." He said, "I don't care." So I got packed off to preparatory school at the age of 11. Now, the summer before that, I went to the town library and got these books out about Billy Bunter, who you might have heard of. And he went to a boarding school, so I was trying to find out what it was like. And when I actually went, I was relieved to get out of the home environment. But of course, then I'm the only black kid in a boarding school and there's nowhere to run to. So it's how can I put it? I mean, Paul, you understand. It's the balance.
Out of the frying pan into the fire.
Absolutely, yes. Which is it? There's always an upside and a downside to everything.
Yeah.
While I started to settle in and enjoyed it there, and then I went on to sort of a school for older boys, an independent school, after passing something called the Common Entrance Exam. Now, when I got to this other school, started off great, again, a bit of bullying and harassment. But at the end of the first year, I'd won 3 academic prizes in English, geography, and ancient history, which is strange, Paul, ancient history.
Not like you.
At the age of 13 or 14, thereabouts. And of course, because of my footballing skills, people tended to befriend me rather than beat me up. So that was quite good. Then, I suppose about a year or so into that, I started to question things. For instance, I would say, look, I haven't done my homework because I don't see the point of learning what year Henry VIII's 6th wife had her head chopped off. Because it'll be in the exam. Well, why does the exam ask that? Detention. And after having detention after another for asking that kind of question, I got sent to the doctor, who determined that I was depressed and put me on antidepressants. And I was kept on those for the next 45 years and told that I'd never be off them.
It's astonishing, but it's not surprising. And it's sad that that's not surprising, because all the things that you're talking about, your childhood growing up, and then you're going against the norm, so to speak. And so there must be something wrong with you. And I'm doing air quotes for people who are listening on the podcast, rather than watching us on YouTube or video. But and I'm so glad that all of that these kinds of stories are making it out in the world, because I think even since COVID, we've seen this huge awakening and this huge shift to challenging those norms and saying, just because something has been like a certain way for X amount of years, it doesn't mean that it has to be the same. And bless the new generation who don't really like alcohol. They don't really like they're so much more focused on the holistic, natural ways of living. And you hear every day people are not drinking anymore, and they're wanting more. And I know we're going to get into this a little bit, Tony, because I know this is a little bit about what you do, but the biohacking stuff and just looking at alternate ways to look after yourself. I think we shared this story one time, but it's not, the problem isn't with our healthcare, it's with our self-care. I've always loved that one. And before we kind of get into more of what you do and what this has led you to, I'm curious for our listeners, what kind of career aspirations did you have in university or leading up to university? We're so curious to know that.
Around that time, life took a funny turn. And, my parents separated. There's a funny story about that, which I'll go into in a bit. I came home from school at the end of term, and the house was all locked up. My key wouldn't fit the door, and I saw that there were sort of bolts stapled in or sort of dug into the ground. I thought, what's going on? I couldn't get in at all. My parents were nowhere to be seen. And so I went to the nearest phone box, for those who remember what phone boxes are like. And before mobiles, we had to memorize numbers, and so you'd always remember your best friend's phone numbers. You just did. You think about that now, that crikey, remembering people's numbers? No chance. But luckily, I remembered my friend's number. I went to the phone box, rang up and said, look, I don't know what's going on. I said, I can't get in the house. Don't know where my parents are. And he came out with his mum to pick me up. And I stayed with them for the rest of my school years when I wasn't at school. And I went back to school at the beginning of term. And because of the way that my dad was, I was, again, the only black kid in the school, but also the only person who paid his own fees in cash. Now, that was because my dad used to have a big safe in the ground and he'd just stuff all the cash in there so that the taxman couldn't find it. And that was how he was. So at the beginning of term, he would just give me a wad and say, go and pay your fees. So I go to the bursar's office, pay the fees, some left over, put it in my pocket, and that will keep me going for a bit. And I went back beginning of this term and I didn't have any money to give the bursar. I explained and went to see the headmaster in the morning and said, I don't know where my parents are, haven't got any money to pay. And I said, I'm staying with these other boys from the school. They took me in over the holidays. And he said, just keep your head down, do the work, and you can stay until you leave school.
Wow.
So for over 2 years, he let me stay at the school without paying fees.
Wow.
That man was a saint. He died a few years ago. A couple of years ago, I went back to the school. There was a memorial for him, and I thanked his wife and children for changing the course of my life.
Wow.
If they didn't do that, I probably would have ended up on the street and life would have taken a very, very different course. So it's amazing sometimes when everything looks like it's basically going to shit, somebody or something will appear and pull you back from the brink. When I left school, I went to do a degree in psychology at a college in London. And I didn't understand the difference between a BA and a BSc. It looked like I'd signed up for a BSc, which was not the best plan, considering it'd taken me 6 goes to get a maths O-level. And there was a 3-hour unseen statistics paper at the end. Anyway, my years at college were quite strange in that I didn't get a grant, and at those times there weren't loans. So to a large extent, I had to borrow and hustle my way through college. Did number things like painted railings, worked in a betting shop, was actually a roadie for a while, was a bouncer, did innumerable things, anything, just to keep my head above water, and borrowed a load of money off people, had to keep paying it back as I earned it and so on. But it was an interesting time and we had a lot of fun. And also during that time, I think I learned to experiment with all the drugs I was reading about on the psychology course. What is this? What does that one do? And yeah, I think I went a bit off the rails for quite a while. I left there. I'd wanted to do marketing and advertising, market research and advertising. Applied for loads of jobs, couldn't get any. And I was unemployed for quite a bit. And then I was homeless for quite a bit as well. So again, went from sort of feast to famine. And again, it was quite a challenging time. I ended up with some other people setting up a short life housing co-op, which housed myself and a number of other homeless people, and managed to get a roof over our heads. Then I went to sign on one day, and they said, oh, we've got a job for you. I said, what's that? They said, the other side of the counter. So that was my first proper job, so to speak, as a clerk in the fresh claims section of the Unemployment Benefit Office. From that, I learned how the system was basically set up not to help anybody. It was to stop people from being helped. And I found that really frustrating. And I was still trying to get a job in market research and advertising. I'd gone for some interviews. And then I went to a small market research firm in North London. I was interviewed by the director there. He said, have you applied for lots of these jobs? And I said, yeah. He said, how'd you get on? I said, just not getting anywhere. And he said, look, nobody's going to tell you this, perhaps, but I will. He said, I like you, but I can't employ you because some of my clients might be prejudiced. And if that's the case, I'm going to lose business by employing you. So that's possibly why you're not getting anywhere. Think about doing something else. Well, I was really grateful for that, but also very angry.
I can imagine. My God. Completely, like, I'm speechless, you know. It's anyway, sorry, go on, Tony.
Well, I used that anger and channeled it into homelessness, because having been homeless and then I was living in a short life housing co-op, I managed to get a job advising homeless people using the experience that I had. And then I got my first job with the local authority as a housing officer. And what I saw quite quickly was that all the people up there who made the decisions, I thought, you don't know what you're talking about. You know, you make these decisions, but you don't understand what it's like to be homeless, to live on a council estate, or to live in short life property. You haven't got a clue. You just talk a load of crap. And I used that anger to climb the greasy pole as fast as possible, to become a director in my early 30s, and the youngest director and first black director in the country, where I had about 20,000 properties and hundreds of staff, contractors, consultants. And I found that satisfying, but also really challenging. And I worked with some very difficult politicians, one of whom, how can I put it? He was quite high profile, and he had this expression for the unemployed people. He would tell them to get on your bike. Now, he was unfortunately involved in an incident where he got injured. It's around the time of Margaret Thatcher and the Brighton bombings. And he was involved in that. He then stepped out of that role and was succeeded by somebody who was known by his initials, IDS, another challenging politician who was quite high profile and went on to lead the Conservative Party for a while. I spent probably about 7 years there doing that. And during that time, I got married, had a child. And on one hand, whilst I was working really long, crazy hours, I thought, okay, I'll reward myself. And so bought a nice big house, nice big car. And everything was fine until divorce. The person to whom I was married was really ambitious and was always pushing me, you know, and saying, right, now you've got to that stage. Now, within the next 2 years, you should be a chief executive. And it's like somebody's just got a foot on the back of your head and all the time making you feel you're not good enough. And needless to say, things kind of fell apart in the marriage. So we got divorced. Went to the divorce court. This lady judge lowered her glasses and said, I'm giving 90% of your assets to your soon-to-be ex-wife, who actually earned more than me at the time, and you'll pay your son's school fees for the next 10 years. Now, I started to protest as to how unfair that was. Where am I supposed to live? How am I supposed to do that? And she said, Mr. Brown, if you don't shut up, I'll have you taken down.
My goodness.
One court officer grabbed this arm, another one grabbed the other, My solicitor waved his hand and mouthed at me, "Let it go." So that was the first time I lost everything.
Oh my word. That is devastating. That is incredible, Tony. Wow.
Unbelievable. And that's the underlying belief that a lot of us have deep down, is that I don't deserve to be loved, or that I'm not good enough. And you could take those life experiences, couldn't you, and think, actually, this is a reinforcement that no matter what I do, it's never good enough. I'm not good enough. Could be a reinforcement of that, couldn't it? And certainly that's been a theme in my life for sure. And I certainly spot it in achievers as well, that it's actually driven by a feeling of not enoughness. The serial achievement is driven by a not enoughness, isn't it? And something that I picked up from some learnings that I did some years ago was thinking about the relationship with our fathers, and that's, whose love did you crave the most when you were younger? Well, for me, it was my father, and it might well have been the incredible chap that brought you up, by the sounds of things. But well, none of us are perfect, of course. But however, you know, if you think it's that person, you think, well, who did I need to be in order to be seen and heard and to feel good enough? Well, I had to achieve something. And you think, well, that's most likely spelled the life path that you may well have been on for 20, 30 years. That initial thing that if I achieve, then I feel good enough and seen and heard. So, but you still have this feeling of never enoughness that just doesn't ever go away. So all these coping mechanisms come in, the social media, the drinking, the food, whatever it may be, to try and escape ourselves of this feeling of never enoughness. And I think that your story and how it moves on from there, Tony, is quite significant in terms of the direction that you went in, well, in a couple of different ways, but I'll let you elaborate. But I think it's important to sort of reflect our journey, that other people can understand and see themselves in our journey of sometimes how our behavior plays out, that we are fully grown adults, but we're acting out with our conditioning as children that hasn't changed, and how that can be so limiting. By, we have a story about our ability, we have a story about what we can be, do, and have in the world, and we fight for that story even though it isn't true. But that's we fight for that limitation, don't we? So, but yeah, so please continue, Tony. I mean, that was quite an incredible step in your life. But yeah, please continue.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Paul. The not enoughness and the imposter syndrome. And I suppose looking back, everything happened because of that. You know, why was I driving myself? Who was I trying to please? Who was I doing it for? Because it probably wasn't me. But it was trying to fill a hole, a gap that was there. So after losing everything that time, I moved to a bedsit, well, a studio place, and tried to pick my life up again. And for about a year and a half, I got a job as a play care worker. And completely different in some ways, because you had to clean the kids up when they messed themselves, which is quite similar to clearing up after a politician. Very similar. Just get the child out of the excrement, get the politician out of the excrement. Yeah, very, after about a year and a half of this, I thought, I can't carry on doing this indefinitely. And then it occurred to me that maybe I could use some of the skills that I'd learned. And I became a housing consultant and set up a consultancy. And it was very good in a way, because I traveled the country and I'd get put up in bed and breakfasts and places whilst I was advising local authorities or housing associations. And it meant also that I was on a day rate and I could accrue a significant amount of money to get back on my feet. Until one day, I got a phone call from my accountant, who I really didn't like at the time anyway. He said, I've got some bad news for you. Is there anything but bad news from you? You know, I said, okay, what is it? He said, you've fallen foul of something called IR35. Now, for those who are not aware of what that is, it's a form of taxation to catch self-employed people who are, how can I put it, minimizing their taxation payments by making them pay the same level of tax as if they were employed by the company for whom they were consulting.
Right.
So if you're earning a rather large amount of money on a day rate, you are going to be paying 50% tax on that. But I wasn't. And he'd rung me to tell me that I now had to. He said, you have now got to pay £275,000 in back tax, and you have a month to do it.
Oh, wow.
Now, when I picked myself up off the floor, I thought, okay. Luckily, because I'd learned a little bit from my previous successes with big cars and big houses, I thought, I'll save this time. And this was before the crash, so I'd saved it all and put it in one bank. And luckily, I hadn't invested it or bought properties. It just sat there in the bank. So now it's all going to leave the bank. And that was the second time I lost everything. I had to start again. Lesson: learn how tax and money works and get a good accountant. Otherwise, you'll be stuck.
I love how everything that you're mentioning, there's a lesson learned. And I just want to point that out for our listeners as well, because how you're able to respond, take responsibility, which we talk a lot about on the show, right, Paul? We talk about, you know, life happening for you. And I actually recently heard this, life happening because of you. And you touched on it as well, Tony, when you were talking about it. You said, you know, what's unfolding is because of the choices that I've made, directly, indirectly, however you want to put it. But the choices that you make really do just unfold everything else. And okay, let's hear the rest. My goodness.
So back on my feet, saving again. And I was then offered a permanent job in London. And it was an ideal job. It was with a housing association, and it was managing about 9 homes for elderly people, about 9 homes for people, ironically, with mental illness. And I loved it. It was great. But the stewardship of the organization was not what it should have been. And it was eventually taken over by another organization. It's the only way to save it. But all the rather expensive senior executives had to be got rid of. And so I was out of that organization and I went back on the road consulting again. we hit about 2009, and then I bought another house in London. I had to take out a larger mortgage than I had hoped for because I'd been cleaned out earlier, and I'd got into another relationship. And all the contracts around that time started to dry up. Bills started to pile up, and I could not get a contract anywhere. I rang up everybody I knew, nothing doing. And that carried on for quite a while. And I thought, how am I going to keep my head above water here?
Mm.
So, okay, I'm going to have to sell some stuff. So the big Lexus, gas guzzling Lexus was the first thing to go. And back to the tube and the buses. But I still had the house just about. However, things went on and the bills piled up, repossession notices happened, court dates, disconnection notices, and I thought, here we go again. We got now to Christmas Eve 2011, and Britain was supposedly coming out of a recession, and I was going into a total depression. My recession hadn't stopped. It was just going on and getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
Christmas Eve, and there was nothing in the house, nothing in the fridge. And the lady with whom I was living, standing at the front door with a suitcase. And she just said, bye, and slammed the door. She slammed the door, and my pride and joy, my grandfather clock, fell on the floor and shattered in pieces.
Gosh, icing on the cake.
I can laugh now, but I wasn't at the time.
Imagine.
And then I just thought, oh, what next? I could hear, Christmas music, Slade coming in from next door. They had the family around there, obviously having a party and a good time. And I just thought, I haven't even got any decorations up, nothing to eat, but I have got 3 bottles of cheap wine left. And I have all these antidepressants accumulated over the years. Went upstairs, ran a bath, got in it, started chugging the pills, glug of wine, more pills, more wine. The idea was that it was a belt and braces job, and that if the pills didn't do it with the drink, my head should just go down underwater and that would do it. But clearly that didn't work. And to this day, I don't know how it happened or how I got there, but I woke up in a locked ward in a mental hospital.
It's
to unpack there, Tony.
Yeah.
Jeez. Wow.
I just couldn't see a way out at all. And
what a place to be in, isn't it? When we hear about this all the time. It's something that's just occurred to a friend in our community, hasn't it? Her partner had departed, let's say, abruptly, and this is an incredibly real thing. So I think it's incredible that we can talk about this and open up about that topic, because when you feel like there's no way out and no one you can talk to about it, it's a very dangerous situation indeed, isn't it? For sure. So how did you come back from that attempted suicide and bankruptcy and repossession, Tony?
Right. If I can just give you a statistic, been doing some work recently. Over 100 people a week in the UK commit suicide, and 75 of those are men. The World Health Organization stated that 700,000 people a year worldwide commit suicide. That's 1 every 40 seconds.
Wow.
It's absolutely tragic.
Yeah.
When you see people in that state, most of them don't show it. Sometimes people get into arguments with people, family arguments or whatever, and they threaten to go and do something. Most of the time they don't. It's the quiet ones who don't say anything who you need to keep an eye on. I mean, don't get me wrong, if someone says they're going to do something, go and stop them. But keep an eye on the quiet ones who don't say anything, because they're the ones most likely to.
That's so sad, isn't it? What a shocking statistic that is, which tells you the state of play in the world, doesn't it? The accumulated pressures of societal norms about what success looks like as well, I'm sure piles on that pressure. But yeah, I'd known that the male statistic was higher, but wasn't quite aware that it was quite at that level. But nonetheless, human life is precious. There are no extra people in the world. We are all everyday heroes, and none of us are cut from a different cloth, and we are all needed with our unique perspective and insight to make this a better place. So yeah, incredibly sad statistic that, Tony, incredibly sad, but certainly brings awareness to the problem for sure, doesn't it? And that's partly around exactly what you do and what we talk about all the time about if you feel like you have a compelling future, you're less likely to do anything, because we have all that fantastic chemistry that goes on to keep us feeling positive and motivated and working towards something that's better. A better tomorrow is on the horizon, but when it isn't, and you feel like there is no way, for anyone who's listening, please reach out to any of us if you feel that way, because you are not alone, for sure. But yeah, thank you for that, Tony. But how did you come back after that? The repossession, the bankruptcy, the attempted suicide.
Well, when I found myself in the hospital, I didn't have any clothes. I didn't have a phone.
Wow.
No house keys. As I said, I've no idea how I got there. I was wearing one of these hospital gowns that left you rather exposed at the back and just covered your modesty at the front, and that was it. And I was dosed up to the eyeballs with goodness knows what drugs I was on. And they decided that my depression was so intransigent that I should have electroconvulsive therapy. Now, for those who aren't aware of it, what happens is that they put electrodes either side of your head. They put something in your mouth to stop you from swallowing your tongue. And then they pass an electric current through the thing surrounding your head. And the idea is that that will shock you out of your depression. It's pretty barbaric and something that really probably should not be done. Some people say that it helped them. It certainly didn't help me. It destroyed some of my short-term memory, which maybe is a good thing for what was happening around that time. But they gave me 19 courses of it, plus all the drugs. So if I wasn't nuts before, I certainly would have been afterwards, and still am, as most people.
My goodness me.
I tried to get out, but they would not let me, and the doors were locked. And they said, you need an appropriate adult to let you out or to go away with, because you are still a danger to yourself and others. And I didn't know anybody. I didn't have my phone, nothing. I thought, oh, crikey, what am I supposed to do? And then one day, luckily, I saw an old computer in the corner, of the ward, and it worked. And I went onto Facebook, just scrolling through it, and I saw the name of a guy that I was at school with, I hadn't seen for maybe 30 years. I just messaged, "Hi, Rog, long time no see, hope you're okay. Could you do me a favour? Come and spring me from a locked ward in a mental hospital." Now, most people, you get something like that, block, delete, bye-bye, go away. Bless him. I mean, out of all the people that I could have come across, and most people would have just blocked and deleted, but he and his wife drove all the way from Warwickshire down to Harrow and came and got me out. If that didn't happen, if I didn't hit upon his name and he wasn't the kind of guy that he was, I don't know if I'd still be in there or whatever.
Unbelievable. There's two lessons there, Tony, isn't there? But one, always ask for help when you need it, which is something that I'm intentionally working on. And number two, check your Facebook messages. just in case.
You might find.
You don't know, we might need assistance in any way. But I mean, that's what an incredible story. But so how did you end up doing what you're doing now? And what life lessons have you picked up along the way, Tony?
I think the other life lesson, when I was trying to get contracts and I couldn't get anything for 2 years, I'm seeing other people working. Well, how come they've got jobs and I can't get a contract? And it reminded me of a program from the 80s called Boys from the Black Stuff. I don't know if you remember it. And there was a
young Tony.
Of course, age difference. Anyway, it's a guy that he was a brickie, a labourer on the building site. He couldn't get a job, and it was during the years when, in the 80s, when you just couldn't get work. And he would around all the building sites and he'd see people working and say, go up to the foreman and say, "Guess a job, I can do that. Guess a job, I can do that." And needless to say, he couldn't get a job. And looking back, that's what I was doing. I was just ringing up headhunters saying, "Guess a job, I can do that." Not quite in the same way, but it's the same thing. And why didn't it work? It didn't work because I hadn't networked. I hadn't built up relationships. I hadn't formed any kind of friendships or networks or support networks. I hadn't helped anybody else, so why would they help me? I hadn't kept in touch with other people. Why they keep in touch with me? And that was a big lesson. And obviously being part of the group that we're in now is so important from that point of view.
Unbelievably important, isn't it? And my own personal experience of that over this last year has really proven very prominent. So I think sometimes you underestimate the power of community and the quality of the relationships you build. It's just all about serving others, isn't it, really? And everything seems to come good, doesn't it? It's amazing that, isn't it? But
it's like a little switch that you need to flip. Now, when I got out and I got back to the house and got into the house, I had a nice GP who then wrote to everybody to whom I owed money and said, "Leave this man alone. This is what he's just tried to do. Give him a breather." Then one day my phone went, and it was somebody that I used to work with a long time ago, an old friend. And she said, "How are you?" And I said, "All right, thanks. Can I come and see you?" "No. Why? I'm not up to seeing anyone at the moment. Don't come." Anyway, she pitched up on my doorstep, and now she's my wife. Couldn't get rid of her at all. And I explained to her the mess I was in, and she said, "Well, you need to do something else then, don't you?" So I said, "Okay." She said, "Look, why don't you come and live with me and rent your house out?" Which is what I did. Managed to save it from being repossessed. And managed to get my head back together, get a few more contracts. And then I thought, well, what should we do? And because we both worked in housing, we thought, we'll do property. And we went on some property courses, because in the end I sold my house. And so then I had some cash. And we went on a number of property courses and signed up and got a coach. Now, the property coach that we got was a really massive Australian guy. He was about 6.5 foot tall. And we called him the honey monster. He was an amazing guy. And he was very woo-woo as well. He could bend spoons with his mind. You know, you would have loved him, Paul. and he used to send me sums every week, just like a teacher, you know, sort of what's the return on investment of this, if this is the cost of that, and so on. And he'd just send me all these sums. And you know how much I hate maths anyway. So not my favorite thing, but I did them. And then he said one day, he said, look, you're taking all these pills. He said, you need to stop this. He said, to progress, you need to leave all that stuff. And I thought, okay. And he said, also, you need to leave London if you're going to invest in property. So we ended up going to Halifax, renting out the house. And I said, well, how do I get off these drugs? And he said, I'm going to send you to see a friend of mine who's a kinesiologist. Take all your pills. Kinesiologist is somebody who does something called muscle testing, your arm, like this. And what they do is they ask questions to which your body cannot lie. So it might start off with, is your name John Smith? And my arm will flop. Is it Tony Brown? Yes. And that's how it works. And he said, your body doesn't want any of these pills. None of them. And because I've been on pills for so long, I found that quite scary. And he said, look, I'll give you some vitamins and minerals, and it's not going to be nice, but this is the only way to do it. Don't do this at home, folks. Don't do it like this. Go and get some advice from your doctor. So I just stopped and took the minerals and vitamins, but I was shaking and sweating for weeks. And I rang him up and said, I can't hack this. This is too hard. And he said, go and get some colonic irrigation to wash it out faster. I won't go into the ins and outs of that, but you can probably guess what's involved in it. And again, strangely, the person who I went to see did this procedure, very nice lady, said, have you ever tried bioresonance? I went, what's that? Never heard of it. She explained what it was and said, look, here's a guy who does it. Go and see it. So I left it and thought, maybe, maybe not. Then we're in the middle of buying the first property up there, and it got complicated with flying and creeping freeholds. I thought, maybe this isn't meant to be. And then a few days after that, I ended up on the floor, curled up in a ball, screaming, unable to wee. And my wife had to whip me down to A&E. And so I've got a prostate problem here. Have some more pills, and we'll line up a biopsy for you. Now I thought, I'll go and see this bioresonance guy. I explained all my woes to him, and I saw him about 3 times, and he put these pads on me and plugged it into a device, and it made all these weird noises, you know, all kind of weird stuff. And I didn't understand it. But then I went back to the hospital for the first biopsy, and the consultant said, well, I don't know what's happening, but it looks like it's evening out. Go away and come back in a few weeks. Another biopsy. Back to the bioresonance guy. Back to the consultant. Well, the good news is you haven't got cancer, and I'm discharging you. Right. Back to the bioresonance guy. I said, thank you for what you did with the prostate issue. Now fix my back and everything else. And he did. I dropped 2 stone, lost the pain, was able to go back to the gym. No more pills. I said, why don't people know about this stuff? I said, we were buying a property. I think that's falling through. Just get me one of these devices and teach me how to use it instead, which he did. And so that's how we got into bioresonance and started to learn about it, do the courses and so on. The thing is that we were in Yorkshire, time in Halifax, and I don't think they were quite ready for. I mean, as several people who we know well live up that way will tell you, Yorkshire people have got short arms and deep pockets, and also rather practical and don't understand all this woo-woo stuff. Didn't know what to do until one day I saw this thing advertised when I went to a property course in Peterborough, a place that some of you might know very well. And we were told that there was somebody called Ryan Pinnock who was going to deliver a talk on intuition. Interesting. Listen to this guy, and he said, I'm doing a course in a few weeks' time in a hotel in London. Okay, let's go along to that. Went along to it, sat down, and this lady came and sat next to us, and she looked over at my wife and said, I had a dream about your wife last night. Interesting.
Conversation starter.
And she said, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm not sure what we're doing at the moment. Explained what had happened, said we've got this bioresonance device, but it's probably not going to work up in Yorkshire. And found out subsequently there are people up there who do it. But she said, look, I've got a physiotherapy clinic in Wimbledon in South London. I think that the people who come to see me would love what you do. Why don't you come and try it out, set up, and I'll let you have a room for a day a week or something. So we were just about to do that, had the equipment delivered there, and COVID hit. So I thought, this isn't going to work. So we went back to Halifax. And I was in the shower one day, and I was thinking about COVID. It was 2020. I thought, breathing, people need oxygen. That's what they need. And so, of course, I did what any mad person would do. I Googled, where can I get an oxygen chamber? And made an appointment and went down to go and try one out. And I thought, this works. And while we were there, I saw a light bed and thought, what does that do? Got in that, had a go. Yeah, that's great. Okay, I have one of those too. By now, my wife's looking at me like she's going to kill me. Where are you going to put these, you dumb so-and-so? And I said, don't know. So I thought we'd better find somewhere, hadn't we? And found a place in Wimbledon. And we were going backwards and forwards between Halifax and Wimbledon for a while. And then last year we thought, look, let's just stay in Wimbledon. And that's how it started.
Wow.
Wow.
And I mean, for people who are listening and they're like, I'm still not super clear about what bioresonance is. I mean, it sounds like an absolute miracle, and like everybody should be visiting your clinic. But could you share with us a brief description of what bioresonance is? If you're hearing that term for the first time, what would you say?
Right. It's based on the principles of quantum physics. That probably doesn't clarify either.
You just have to try it, everybody. You just have to go experience it, which
just
is
go and see Tony. Yeah.
Some of you might have seen a film or a video or something of an opera singer in a glass. And the opera singer sings and she holds the note. I won't do it because I can't sing. But she holds the note at a particular frequency and the glass shatters. Now, I'm sure if you go on YouTube, you'll probably find it and you'll see it in action. That happens because the frequency at which her voice is resonating shatters the glass. Now, everything on Earth vibrates, including us. So whatever you're sitting on, whatever you're looking at now is actually vibrating, but you just can't see it vibrating. And it has a certain frequency. All parts of our body have frequencies, different frequencies. Liver, kidney, eyes, everything.
Mm-hmm.
A bioresonance device has stored within it upwards of 2,000 frequencies relating to all the bodily parts and illnesses that the body can get. Now, if say you've got a pain in the stomach, if you can imagine the analogy I just said about the opera singer and the frequency, that frequency would be directed at your stomach until whatever is causing that, be it a parasite or something else, is dead. That's how it works. And so with regard to my back, for instance, when I first experienced how much benefit you can get from it, my back was vibrating at the wrong frequency. And what this did was pull it back into harmony. And then it all worked as it should do. So that's how it works.
So in a nutshell, Tony, it just basically, if you're bent out of shape, this gets you back into homeostasis.
Excellent, Paul. Do you want a job?
And also, are you free next Tuesday? It was my next question.
No, but seriously, everybody, we're putting Tony's contacts, in our show notes. So if any of this sounds really interesting to you and you want to explore more, Tony, he offers these 10-minute consultations as well, but go and visit him, go and visit the clinic in Wimbledon. And if you can't get to Wimbledon, I'm sure, Tony, you have some other potentially contacts or resources for people to use to sort of find in their own area. I mean, I'm in Canada at the moment and I'm thinking of my dad and I'm like, I want to get you into bioresonance like ASAP, but how popular is this? Or is this just sort of groundbreaking? Like, is this worldwide? Is this available everywhere? Or is this just in the UK? Or like, how can people get access? It just boggles my mind to know. I mean, it's exciting because you have all these advancements in technology and, my dad is struggling with his pancreatic cancer right now. And I know that, I'm in this where I am, there's a lot of my friends who their parents are getting older, but they're also feeling themselves like, I need to prioritize my health. I need to take this preventative action because chronic illness, I don't have the statistics, but yes, people are living longer, but they're also living with more pain and suffering. And it sounds to me that this can help or be a solution to strengthen your, I don't know if strengthen's the word, but like, your vitality, your longevity, all of these things that we're all craving as we get older to protect our muscle strength, to protect our joints, to protect our organs, have our body functioning and at that optimal frequency, that optimal state of being, which is what wellness is all about. So tell me, or tell us, is this popular? Is this just getting started? What's the
It's very popular in China. It's used a lot there because a lot of it's based on the principles of traditional Chinese medicine.
I see.
In Germany, an awful lot of traditional doctors use bioresonance alongside their traditional medicine.
Mm-hmm.
As a result, give out less pills. What you're saying about longevity and health is really important. Statistically, certainly in this country, we will live the last 25% of our lives, from 60 upwards, with a chronic or limiting illness or disability.
Yeah.
That's how important it is to take care of ourselves when we are younger.
Yeah.
The thing is that these are natural methods. So, for instance, we had a doctor bring in his patient with Alzheimer's, and he put him in the oxygen chamber. And that restored some of his cognitive ability and prevented him declining further. But if you think about it, it's just oxygen, concentrated oxygen. And what happens is that we have these things called mitochondria in the brain, which are like little batteries. And as we get older, they start to wane. And we have things called telomeres at the end of these things, and they sort of shrink as we get older.
Mm-hmm.
What oxygen therapy does is stop them shrinking and, in fact, can elongate them, which keeps people's cognitive ability where it needs to be. There are also nutritional aspects to this as well, because there are certain foods that will help and certain foods that won't help. The problem is that although we're in one of the most technologically advanced societies, supposedly, people are getting sicker and sicker. And it's to do with the air that we breathe, the water we drink, and the food that we eat.
Yes.
An avocado now has an eighth of the nutritional value of an avocado in the 80s. That's because soil's depleted, the way that things are farmed, the pesticides and stuff that are sprayed on things. So it's very difficult to avoid all this stuff. A lot of it's just done for profit. If you eat meat, the way that animals are farmed nowadays is not the best way. Some of them are bunched together, then they get sick. When they get sick, they inject them with antibiotics, which actually make them bigger because it messes up their gut microbiome. So the animals get bigger, fatter, more profitable, a bit more meat on them. But then we eat them and we're ingesting the antibiotics as well, which then messes up our gut, and so on and so on and so on. So there are lots of moving parts to the jigsaw of health and wellness, as you're well aware. But what we need to do is try and keep our condition below the level of toxicity that tips us over into illness.
Yeah. Beautifully said. I love hearing you talk about the frequencies and just the going back to basics and educating people about really being intentional about what you're putting in, on, and around your body. You know, even the materials that we have in our homes, you know, plastic Tupperware versus glass Tupperware, like really simple things, but and this holistic approach to wellness is a huge passion of all of ours, because we've all tried it a different way, and we've all experienced the true vitality, the true life that starts to open up for you once you start to rid yourself, your life, of those toxins internally, externally, energetically, and to have everything back into this harmony, this homeostasis that we've been talking about. And it's really fascinating to know where bioresonance is most popular. You know, like you said, China, the UK, Germany. Yeah, I'm really curious if it comes to North America, because there's, you know, a huge obesity issue here. You know, the food portions. I mean, we'd have to have a whole other episode on this. But yeah, it's incredible to hear your story, and to hear the amount of guardian angels that were in your life, if I could just say. You know, it's so amazing when you can look back at your life and you look to see all of these pivotal moments, but also these pivotal people that come into your life, either for good or for bad. Some people leave and some people come, and you know, they're in the perfect time, even though it might not feel like it at the time. So we really appreciate you coming in to sharing your story.
About thoughts as well, which is really, really important. And I hope that this gives some hope to people. When I was right down the bottom, so to speak, my outlook on life was really negative. I could see the good in anything. And it took going on a course with Dr. John DeMartini, who some of you may have heard of, and just on a course of his recently, which was 14 and a half hours a day, 7 days in a row. And that man's knowledge is astronomical. When I went to his live events in London, something called the Breakthrough Experience, and he pulled me out in front of the class. You, come here. Now, tell me someone who's really pissed you off in your life. Hey, my ex-wife. Why is that? It's that, and so on. Wine. Then he said, okay, now give me 50 ways in which you benefited from that relationship. And I said, oh, don't be stupid. He said, no, calm down, think. Well, not in that relationship anymore. Good. I can think more clearly now. Good. I'm not stressed as much. Good. I carried on. I got to about 40. He said, any more? And I said, no, that's it. He said, no, I want another 10. He squeezed another 10 out of me. He said, now what do you think about that relationship? I suppose it taught me a lot really, and I suppose it taught me how to set boundaries, what I will and won't put up with, stronger in some ways. Is it good? Now you're learning, I can start to teach you something. Now you've got that imbalance out of your head. And since then, I've started to look at everything that way. I mean, one of the things that he teaches us all is that there's an upside and a downside, and a downside and an upside. So you come back to this homeostasis again, and that's how it all balances out. And it's, I'm sure that you've heard the expression, what you think about, you bring about. And, I'm totally woo-woo now, and I believe that 110%. If you think the right things, you'll get the right things. You think bad things, say bad things, come back and bite you in the rear. And I think that the more that has become clearer to me, is the better things have become. The other thing, as Paul said, if you're in a state and you haven't got anyone, reach out, talk to somebody, talk to us, talk to anybody who is helpful, who you can think of. But don't try and do it on your own, because it's very difficult. You tend to go around in circles.
And we do, there are a lot of hotlines available where you are. There's lots of resources available to help you. And, everyone is, it's so nice when somebody just has that open door for you, even though you might not feel like it, people do. And I love what you were saying about the language, just before we kind of end things here, but the language, there's this Dr. Masaru Emoto. He's Japanese, and he studies water consciousness. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he talks about, you have, okay. So he talks about, your thoughts and how they influence that they can influence water structure. And if you think of your body as being, 40 to 70% maybe of water, if you think about the thoughts that you have being able to change the structure of the water molecules that are inside your body, that's incredible, and I 100% agree with you. And I know Paul does too, that the language and the words that you use, they will dictate your future. They will sort of unfold, your destiny will unfold the way you want it to, based on what you think it should be. Like, it's great. It's wild to me. And I know people who are listening, they've either done vision boards, or they've done visualization, or they've had goals, and they've had the focus, and they've said, they've written down their goals every day, or you revisit things, and you start to see, wow, this is actually, I'm progressing. I'm making my way towards this because I'm so focused, and my thoughts are intentional, and they're positive. It may not be rainbows and sunshine every day, because Lord knows it's difficult, but you can either choose to be positive about it, or you can choose to be a victim, or like you're always chasing something you don't have yet, which we always come back to this be do have moment. But yeah, Thanks, Tony. This has been so incredible.
That's just to pick up on what you've both said there. Words are light. So if we think about the earliest teachings, we asked someone, could you enlighten me? Words are light. Words lead, and it's that powerful. That's why it's called spelling. So when you write something down, you are spelling. That's how powerful it is. Like, our limiting beliefs roll out of our mouths. And we often talk about there's 40 to 70,000 thoughts a day, but we have a negative bias towards that. And just something which changed my life, because it's not something that's, oh, well, this has worked for me, so it will work for everyone, because biology scales, as we know, Tony. Biology scales. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, doesn't matter. Biology scales. And that we can change the negative default filter of 70% of those thoughts being negative rumination just by a simple gratitude practice, because it changes the filter. So you look for the good to appreciate, and it changes how we filter information from the reptilian brain to look for what's wrong for protection to what's good. So I think having a gratitude practice definitely shapes the filter biologically for you to feel better. But you're right, whatever you focus on, you're going to feel first and foremost. But you never change your life until you change your energy, that's for sure. So you can't continually do the same things, go to the same places, hang out with the same people, watch the same TV, and expect your life to change, because you have to do something different, right? So I think it's really important to understand that the conscious mind is the gardener and the subconscious mind is the soil. And the soil will accept anything that we put in there, and whatever you keep planting will grow. So just make sure it's serving you. I mean, that's essentially it, isn't it? Stand guard at the door of your mind. So there's a physical diet and the mental diet. And I think that whoever you follow on social media, those thoughts become your thoughts. So whoever you follow, that becomes your future thought process, which may be a fantastic thing or a not so fantastic thing. So I think you have to have a good audit of whoever you follow on your social media channels, because those are your future thoughts. So I think that's incredibly important to pick up, and I think that's incredible. But just a thought of mine, is there any particular, two questions if I may, Tony, my sincere apologies. Favorite quote of yours that stuck with you for a long time, that's impactful to you?
Yes, just one minute. It's actually something that I saw on Facebook this morning, and it was written by somebody who you probably know, Mr. Paul Million.
Yes.
Yeah, a legend.
Yeah.
And he put something up saying, the best advice comes from those who have felt the detriment, because they have the practical exam, not just the theory. And I saw that he put that up this morning, and I wrote it down. I thought, wow.
Unbelievable. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that speaks volumes of your story also, and all of ours, is because you live through that, you live and learn, take the lessons, and we hand it back, don't we, to serve the person we once were and everybody else who can benefit from it. And so anybody who doesn't have access to the amazing bioresonance work that you do, if there would be 3 things that the listeners or people who are viewing this, what would the preventative measures be for chronic illness in your experience, Tony, that someone could do right now, starting today or tomorrow, because we'll give them tonight to think it over, of course, so that they could take away? Any key advice in your experience that people can implement just to look after themselves better?
I think a number of things, really. Firstly, starting with sleep. If you don't get enough good quality sleep, that messes up the next day for you and the day after and so on. So try and make sure that you get enough good sleep, and as far as possible, cut down on caffeine, try and avoid sleeping tablets, drink tea with valerian, natural things if you are having problems sleeping. The other thing, which I'll come on to, which links into that, the second thing is hydration. People tend not to drink enough water, and that has an all-round effect. You're not flushing your body out, you're not regulating your temperature properly. Toxins just build up if you don't drink enough water. Then we come on to exercise. Need to exercise. We are made to move. I'm sure, Paul, you know about motion and emotion. And if we don't exercise, again, the toxins store up. When we sweat, that's good. That's getting rid of the toxins. It also reduces your stress level, and it helps with dopamine, which is your mood, and keeps that at a higher level as well. Next is diet. We're lied to an awful lot about what's good for us and what isn't. I haven't got time to go into all of that today, but please just watch what you eat. If something says low fat or healthy version, put it back. It isn't. It's exactly the opposite. And just avoid things. If you pick up a packet and it's got something unpronounceable on it that you've never heard of, put it back. It's something that's not meant for the human body. Easier said than done, but just be aware of it and try and balance your diet too. Something that we're going to be doing more of is looking at individualized nutrition, precision nutrition. Because what you give one person is not going to have the same reaction in another person. So what we're looking towards doing now is testing individuals to find out exactly how their particular microbiome affects their well-being generally. And from that, I mean, there's some amazing work that's been done in the place where they invented the atomic bomb, which I mentioned earlier. And they are working out how exactly to maximize and optimize people's health individually. And that, I think, is the way to go, because we are all so different. And also because they've taken so much nutrients out of the soil, the farming methods are not what they used to be. I mean, the saying, what was it? Let food be thy medicine, was great at one time, but it's not now because the food is not what it used to be. So we all have to be aware of that. And then the final thing is stress, keeping our stress levels down as much as we can. We're bombarded with so much flipping information nowadays. That's really hard. Try and avoid television, try and avoid the newspapers, because there's nothing good in them at all. And try and stop doom scrolling on your phone too. As Paul said earlier, it's addictive, and we are hardwired to look to the negative and the most fearful things and horrible things. Try and stop doing that. Or when it happens, try and be aware, be mindful, so that you don't get sucked into it. If you think about the news, when is it on? It's on in the morning at breakfast. It's on at lunchtime. It's on at tea time. It's on before you go to bed. And none of it's good. And that really affects your mind. It affects your vibration. It affects everything that you are, everything. So be careful. The same with newspapers and listening to certain radio stations that just rehash the news over and over again, have phone-ins and people ring in. Everybody's more depressing than the one before and so on. Avoid it. Listen to some nice music.
Brilliant.
I love everything that you just said there. And we're going to try and put that summary in the notes as well, because they're really simple things, which we always talk about on the show, Paul, don't we? It's just really going back to those basics. And actually, the fact that you just said the food is medicine thing, I think that's so interesting, because I actually do say that a lot. Food is medicine, but you're absolutely right. It's just not as clean and pure as it was. I mean, even fish, I love fish, but the whole thought of the microplastics, and I mean, I've witnessed what it looks like in the water and in the Mediterranean Sea, where you have these little bits of plastics, and you're thinking, how many fish actually ingested that? And am I going to actually be eating that? And yeah, just the whole food industry in itself, it's devastating that so much of it is for profit in terms of the policies and what's organic and what's not organic. And I think and when I was really getting into essential oils, I was really learning a lot about label standards, and it was really interesting to find how they differ across the world in different countries, but how governments actually say, oh, if it contains less than X%, then you don't have to list it on the ingredients. Like, that is just not right. Like, if it has any trace, you see it on labels with peanuts, like this may contain traces of peanuts. So why shouldn't you say that this may contain traces of whatever else? I mean, I just think that there's just so much we can do as a society. And it really does start with each one of us, which is always our message on this podcast, that it starts with you. So the fact that you're getting into like personalized medicine and personalized healthcare, preventative healthcare, these are all huge trends that we're seeing in the future of health. And, like the in the UK, I know there's the NHS, and in Canada there's the federal healthcare system where you pay in with your taxes and everything like that. But at the end of the day, there's so much move towards these private clinics that are offering things like you are, in terms of the oxygen chambers, the bioresonance, because we're all looking for something different. We don't want the pill. Yes, that serves its purpose, but if we can take action on our own, take responsibility, and put the things in and on our body that will serve us, reduce the toxins. I'm getting so jazzed about this. We need another episode for sure.
I'll say don't kick us off about that as well.
I know. We should just stop there, because we're going to go on the whole day. We know who to call if we want to do a wellness marathon. That's what we have to say about that. But
absolutely. Well, apparently there might have been some intervention during the time on the planet with the human race and the length of the telemeters, Tony, but that may be another episode again.
Yes, definitely.
I had no idea, but yeah, I mean, I think so. But it's just been incredible, Tony. Thank you so much. And for those of you who want to learn more about bioresonance, oxygen chambers, even the nutrition side of things, I know you also do, Tony, you mentioned, and I know you're in Wimbledon, so we've put all of your contact notes. I know you're actually really an advocate for Movember, which I just wanted to sort of throw it out there, because we are Movember. It's the month for you guys. So are you taking donations as well? Are you raising money for Movember on your part, or?
We're not doing it through our clinic, but we're encouraging people to donate to charities.
Okay.
Main things for men: testicular cancer, prostate cancer, stress.
Yeah, really important. And go follow Tony on Instagram. You've heard him today. He is an exquisite speaker. He's got an enormous amount of knowledge. We just thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, Tony. It's been incredible, and I know we'll do it again.
Thank you so much, Tony.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
See you guys soon.
Bye.